coaches, we bring back the college football rewind tonight. I'm excited to get everybody up and running here in just a moment. But tonight's show, I want to make sure I give a special shout out to John Griggs for helping us get this show on the road here tonight, making it happen with Northwestern Mutual. John Griggs, his goal of his practice, to educate and empower people to reach their full potential. I really appreciate John tonight stepping up to help us out and get this thing out and running here. If you're following me on YouTube tonight, if you're watching it, you can put comments in the box. I will try to pull some comments over, as many as I can for the guys. If you have questions for anybody, please do. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button right in the bottom right-hand corner. And if you're watching on Facebook, I appreciate you. You can do the same thing as well. Just put your comments in the Facebook comment box, and you can bring those questions over. So let's see. I believe we had everybody here. The only one I think we were having a tough time with was Coach Kramer. So let me see. Bring the guys in one by one. Let's go. Let me get Nikki over here. Let me unmute everybody. We got Pat and Coach Kramer waiting to get on here. I can see you guys. Can you guys hear me up on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Crystal clear.
All right, so we got Nick from C-Bus on with us. We got Coach Medicis on with us. We got Coach Dercola on with us tonight. And then we got Coach Passalacqua, who I'll bring on in just a moment. So let me flash Coach P on here. There's Pat. Hey, at least we got you on this time, Pat, right?
Finally.
We just got to get Jim on. I don't know. I could still – his screen's blank. I can't see him. Can you hear us, Coach? Okay. I can hear you, so that's good. But once I pull you guys in, I'll be able to hear even more. So, all right. Well, guys, last time we talked, we had a lot of topics, and I was looking through my agenda, and the first thing I said was, how the hell are we going to get through this thing in an hour? We can spend probably an hour talking about a few topics. But I want to start with the Syracuse piece, because I know we spent some time before on Syracuse, and since we've talked last, Syracuse has lost a couple more games. They're now 1-8. Their last game they lost 30-0 to Louisville. They'll finish up. They'll go home against NC State and on the road at Notre Dame. So, Jake, I'll start with you because you're the ACC guy. Any change with Coach Babers? I'm still hearing that financially, because of the COVID, they think they're still going to hang on to him for another year. Do you still believe that's going to happen?
Yeah, I still think he's going to stay for at least one more year. With this year being different for all coaches and everything, and he had a couple of opt-out guys and guys injured. So I think you're starting to see a lot of his young guys playing to get experience. So I think they're going to give him one more year. And with Dino, it seems like every year he pulls out that one great win. So he has, he's that Notre Dame on that last game that who knows? He always seems to come out with one great speech every year in the locker room to get those guys going. So I think he has one more year.
And Pat, how about you? You think he's earned another year?
Well, I don't know if you saw my message. I can't hear what anyone's saying, but I don't, with the weird season or lack of an off season they had with all the freshmen on the field and a couple new coordinators, I don't think he's going anywhere right now. I think he's at least got himself another year. I don't think they win another game.
Medicis, you're the Syracuse guy. You've been with me the last 2 to 3 weeks on Sports Watch, and I think you're with me. He's got to go.
He's got to go. It's like we said, there's no progression with anything. There's nobody getting better. There's no adjustments being made. Unfortunately, like we said before, I think financially they're in a spot where they can't make a change. I think Brent Axe said it was between $15 to $17 million for a buyout right now, and at this point, I just don't see it happening. So Babers will be there next year and possibly for 2 more years before they're able to potentially buy that contract out.
Jim, what do you think? You think he's earned another year, or does he get the pass with COVID?
I think he will be back. I agree with you guys that he will be back financially, but what concerns me most is he looks disinterested on the sideline. I mean, you watch that game against Louisville, prime time Friday night game, great recruiting opportunity, and there just seemed to be no emotion going on. There was some very elementary mistakes being made. Nick's touched on it. You see very little improvement over the course of the year. It's almost like he's cashed it in for the season.
C-Bus, what do you think, man?
I mean, I always defer to you guys on Syracuse football, but I do look from a distance and look at the loss between injuries and opt-outs, right? I mean, I think they've lost 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs down. I think they got a fullback playing left guard, right? So I mean, I think some of that you have to take into account, right? Does it excuse all the losses? Of course not. I think from what I've seen, I think the secondary, for all the losses they've had in the secondary, I think they've lost 5 guys in the secondary. The secondary is not playing half bad. So I see some silver linings there. I think he's got to get another year. I think you guys touched on it from a financial perspective. He's probably going to luck into that regardless. But he's going to be on a short lease next year, right? I think it's got to be bowl game, and it's probably got to be at least seven wins next year for them to give him another run, right? But I do think the deck has been stacked against him consistently this year walking into the season with COVID, and I think you got to take that into account. Fair or not?
Well, listen, I said this last Saturday on Sports Watch. I said the only thing I would say right now is I think he will get the pass just financially. They can't afford it. But do you want to part ways with the coach at the end of the year? Or let's say next year they play a full schedule and they can play the Colgates, they can play the Fordhams of the world and get a couple wins early. But let's say they struggle out of the gate. Isn't it better to part ways with a coach at the end of the season versus making that mid-season change? That's the only thing I worry about with Coach Babers in Syracuse. But I'll agree with Coach Kramer. When you watch him on the sidelines, everybody's so used to those rah-rah speeches. Those players don't even look like they're playing hard for him. They're just going through the motions to get this miserable season behind them. They're probably saying, I'm surprised they've played 9 games this year with the whole COVID piece. But I just think they look uninterested. I would make the move. I would try to find some boosters with money, and I would part ways. I'd get them out of there. I think there's got to be some change. But I got to give my Nicky boy to start this one. The Big Ten. Tell me what you thought of the Buckeyes in Indiana.
Indiana brought everything that you would expect from a team trying to prove themselves. I love the way that they play. They attack on defense. They blitz you constantly from first series to the last. They don't stop bringing the pressure. And I thought you saw Fields probably for the first time as a collegiate quarterback really feel that pressure. He made some uncharacteristic throws that we haven't seen. Really, I think that blitz caused him to press a little bit. Ohio State has some communication problems in the secondary. At safety, that defense is predicated on a strong front four and a really strong safety. I think down here in Columbus, we took for granted Jordan Fuller. I think, Jordan Fuller, if we all watch Monday Night Football, picked off Tom Brady twice. Ohio State Buckeye picking off a Michigan quarterback, which we've seen that for the last 10 years pretty consistently. But, I think what we've started to see now with Ohio State is replacing 3 starters in the secondary is awfully difficult to do. But I think Ohio State, they are what we thought they were going to be, a really strong offense, defense coming around. But I'll tell you what, man, Tom Allen, hell of a football coach. Talk about a guy that his team wants to play for. Those guys would run through a brick wall for him anytime, anywhere, any place. And you have to respect a team like Indiana and give him credit. He's recruiting, Rock, going after the state of Florida. I think he has the most Florida kids on the roster, on their roster in the Big Ten, which says a lot about Indiana and a lot about the other schools in the Big Ten that maybe they're sleeping a little bit on the Sunshine State.
Well, I'll say this. The only thing I saw from that game was, I agree with you on Tom Allen. I thought Indiana played well. I thought Indiana deserved to be in the top 10 in the BCS because I still think they're a good football team. I mean, really, you take the pick 6 away, they're a couple stops away from winning that game. But to me, when you talk about Justin Fields, I think it's like any quarterback, right, guys? You get any pressure on him, you put him in tight spots, they're going to make some big mistakes. That was really the first time we've seen him under pressure, and he made some bad throws. Against the good teams, against the Bamas and the Clemsons of the world, you can't make those types of mistakes. And really, we only got 4 games from Ohio State and some of these Big Ten teams right now. So, Jake, what'd you think?
With the Fields thing, it's kind of reminds me of what happened last year with Trevor. Everyone thought after a couple of games, Trevor's throwing interceptions. Oh, he looks down to earth and everything, where Trevor last year was trying to do too much. And it looks like Fields at times was trying to do too much instead of just take what the defense is giving you. They faced a better team this last week, but I think he kind of got into the hype a little bit, just like a lot of quarterbacks do, is, hey, I'm in the Heisman race. I got to throw long touchdowns. I got to do the flashy plays to be noticed. And with only having 8 or 7 games left, he already sees he's halfway through the season. And he still needs to make a huge impact to probably get the Heisman or even put Ohio State even further on the map, that showing that flashy type of offense.
And Pat, were you impressed with Ohio State, or were you more impressed with Indiana in that game?
I was more impressed with Indiana. I mean, I think everyone expects, what Ohio State did. But I think for Indiana to hang around and, I mean, you said it, take that interception off the board, and it's a different ball game. I wish we could see a rematch, but it's not going to play out that way.
Jim, how about yourself? Did you learn more about Ohio State after that game, or did you learn more about Indiana, or how about the Big Ten in general?
Well, I think Ohio State proved that what we thought. I still think they're one of the top couple teams in the country. I was thoroughly impressed with Indiana's skill players. I thought that there's very few college teams that will be able to match that on the perimeter. Ohio State showed the ability to stop the run, make Indiana one-dimensional. And I think Fields is a dude, and I think Nick touched on this last time. I would love, as much as I love Clemson, Alabama wide receivers versus Ohio State wide receivers. That's an NFL showcase game right there.
Medicis, how about you?
I just think I'm not sold on the Big Ten being as good as they've been the last couple of years. You look at Ohio State and you say Nebraska 1-3, Penn State 0-5, Rutgers 1-4, and they've only played Indiana. And then you look at Indiana's schedule. So you got Penn State winless, Michigan struggling, Michigan State 1 win, Rutgers. I know they're good. I just don't know how good they are because I don't know that they've played anybody. I don't know how good Indiana is because Penn State isn't very good. Michigan isn't very good. So until they play another good team, which won't be until the semifinals, but I don't know how good Ohio State is.
Medicis, can't we say that about every college football team probably outside of Clemson and Notre Dame because they played each other? I mean, if you look at the SEC, Bama whitewashed A&M, which I think we can all argue, is probably a little bit of fool's gold there. You look at the SEC, LSU's down, Auburn is average. I think I don't disagree with you, but I think it's probably across the board. I don't think it's a Big Ten thing. I think you look at the conferences in general this year. They're a top heavy conference just about everywhere you look. I think there's a discrepancy between the top 2 or 3 teams in each conference and the rest of the league. Big Ten for sure, right? Seeing Penn State and Michigan down, but it's by no means a Big Ten thing to me. I think it's all over the country.
Well, I just look at the other side of the conference where you have Northwestern and Wisconsin, and that was a decent football game, but neither of those teams impressed me. Neither of those teams, if I'm Clemson, I'm saying, man, I hope Northwestern doesn't get hot, and I see that. No, if I'm Clemson, Alabama, I'm thinking, man, I hope they can upset Ohio State because, man, I'd take them over Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Texas A&M. I mean, they're the 6th best team if they're in the SEC right now.
You don't think Indiana can hang with Auburn and Georgia?
I mean, Indiana's, 5 inches away from losing to Penn State, who hasn't won a game yet and got blown out by, Iowa.
And Georgia's lost by double digits twice this year and got wrecked off the field. I mean, I think you're picking and choosing there.
Here's what I'll say, though. This is a question I want to throw out there because I don't disagree with any of you guys. I mean, listen, Georgia's still in the top 10, 15 of the BCS with 2 losses, which I think is pathetic. But I think they're doing that based off the SEC. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I want to ask is, Coach Dercola brought up the Trevor Lawrence thing last year, and, you take the Justin Fields, you take all these Heisman guys, right? I personally think that game against Indiana, Nick from CBus, Ohio State was running the football extremely well. Teague ended up with 169 yards. Sermon had, I think, 60 or 70 yards. I almost think sometimes these coaches want to get the stats to get these guys a chance for these awards at the end of the season, because when they were running the football, Indiana couldn't stop them. Do you think sometimes that these coaches get caught up in the Heisman trophies and the Maxwell Awards and all the Biletnikoff Awards and try to get these stats? I don't know why they got away from the run game against them.
Well, I think it's a good call out, right? And I think that goes back to a little bit of what of the recruiting trail, right? I think they tell these kids, hey, you come to Ohio State, we're gonna showcase you, right? So I think there's truth in that. And I agree, Ohio State did get away from the run. And I think part of what you saw with Fields is with Indiana bringing 7, 8, 9-man fronts and pressures on occasion, right? Fields sees wide open players and he knows he has to have somebody open, and that in turn is intoxicating for a quarterback because they know the big plays have to be there. And that's where somebody like Day, which I thought was out of character for him, doesn't simplify the offense a little bit and run some more of those slants, screens, or stay with Teague and Sermon and try to take advantage of that. So I definitely think it was a game that I don't think they underestimated Indiana, but I think as typical, you have a couple calls that don't go your way early. They had a fumble that they could have reviewed and they didn't, and before you know it, you're sitting there in the second half. Indiana gets a couple touchdowns, and now you're in a dogfight, right? So I definitely agree with you. I think there's definitely some stats that they're going after, and I think it's promises, and I think it's why the kids love to play for coaches like that too, though, right? It's a double-edged sword.
And Jim and Jake, I want to go to you guys next. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about, obviously, let's go to the other side of the Big Ten, the Northwestern Wisconsin game. I think Coach Medicis brings up a good point. I don't know how good college football a lot of these teams are this year, outside of maybe the top couple teams in each conference. But if you go to that Northwestern game, I think we learned a little bit about Northwestern. But is there a better story really than the Tom Allens and the Pat Fitzgeralds, who Northwestern, I say this every year, I feel like they win 8 to 10 games every year, and they always fly under the radar. What'd you guys think of Northwestern and Pat Fitzgerald?
Yeah, I mean, Northwestern is always – they play that undercard very well every year. And so now it's going to be interesting now with them being, I think, 5-0, that he's going to be one of the top dogs and teams are going to be gunning for him. So I know that he has those guys, that mindset of being the underdog, and he does a great job of watching social media and like the fighting the Reese's they were calling, because one of the announcers called him out. And when it comes down to like the the Indianas and Northwestern, I think what helps them out and some of these other teams is everyone not having a spring ball, and so it kind of puts them on the same playing field a little bit. Everyone came in at camp at the same time, usually had about the same practice and everything. And so they have usually the older teams with more seniors and juniors and everything. So they didn't have to have so much of a learning curve as some of these other conferences that have freshmen and sophomores playing for the first time, because those other guys ahead of them went on to the draft. And so I think you're seeing that a lot more this year with those middle-class teams and lower teams that are senior-driven.
Coach Kramer, how about you? What do you think of Pat Fitzgerald and how those Northwestern teams? I mean, they just play hard.
They play hard, and I agree with Jake with a lot of those points. I think it's a lot harder to be the hunted than the hunter. And I think, like Jake said, they most of the times they're playing as the hunter in those games. And now, what separates the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Clemsons is every game they play, they're favored, and every single game they play, they have to produce. And we give credit to these underdog teams for once every so often rising to the occasion and making it happen. But it's so difficult to play at that level in the prime time week after week. And I think that's why we think Saban and Day and Dabo are such great coaches, because they get those kids up every single week to play.
And Pat, how about not just Coach Fitzgerald too, but I think Paul Chris is another one of those guys, the Wisconsin coach, who doesn't get as much credit as he deserves. But he's similar when you think of Pat Fitzgerald. I always think of Paul Chris too. He's an underrated coach who I think gets the most out of Wisconsin too.
Yeah, though it's like they were just saying, you got if you don't beat those big teams, though, you're never going to get that credit that that they deserve. But like you said, they're all playing really well. They come out and play every week. They'll beat all the other teams like Northwestern. I mean, they'll beat everybody, but there's no way they'll play with and beat Ohio State. They maybe for 2-3 quarters, but in the long run, they can't compete for a full game.
Well, I got to give. Well, I want to talk Jim Harbaugh again for a minute, and I'll bring Nick from C-Bus to give me the business on him again. But I do want to talk about that Rutgers Michigan game just for a minute, because that's about all it's worth is a minute. We beat Rutgers, yay! We're happy about it. But again, I want to talk a little bit about they should have lost the game because Rutgers had the field goal that they missed in overtime, else they would have won the game. But Joe Milton comes out of the game. In comes Cade McNamara. Cade looked pretty good at quarterback. And now I know this week so far, we would think, right, 99%, McNamara should be your starting quarterback this week going forward for Michigan. Did we learn anything different, Medicis, on Michigan this week?
Well, you know what? We're going to have to see after another game. Again, we don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback. You assume Milton's going to, or the new guy is going to be in there and starting this week. But, I mean, Harbaugh's made some interesting choices. He's been pretty loyal. So, I'm interested to see what they do. But you know what? They won the game, and that's the way, good teams find ways to win games. We've been saying that for a while. And you know what? If Michigan's going to turn this thing around, there's nothing wrong with winning ugly. I mean, you don't get style points for losing. So I just think that, the fact that Michigan was able to win that game in a game they probably shouldn't have won is a step in the right direction. And like we said all year, if they get hot and they can steal a game with Ohio State at the end of the year, Michigan fans like yourself might say, all right, you know what? There's some hope at the end of the season here. Maybe we got something going in the future.
Listen, I hope you're right. I'm a big Greg Schiano fan, so I was kind of pulling for both. But I don't think we learned too much different than we talked about the last time on this show with Michigan and Harbaugh. I still think that they play uninspired. I still think that Don Brown and that defense, he's got to get away from this man coverage. It's killed them week in and week out. It's killed them for the last, 3-4 years. But Jake, how about you? Did we learn anything different about Michigan?
No, I mean, like you said, the frustrating part is watching it and seeing them getting torched on defense, and it's kind of the pro mentality of, oh, this is what we do, you got us, where you would think they would make changes. All right, here's our two best guys. What do they do better? Are they man coverage or are they more zone? If they're more zone, we need to adapt. And that's the frustrating part of, even being a coach. You find what your best players do well, and you do that. You don't try to make them do something else that they're not going to do well. And being at a college like that you have tons of talent coming in and recruits, you pick your 2 best, 3 best, and what do? And I believe they need to make a change on that aspect, especially with defense. He's made a change with the offense to try to get some of the better quarterbacks in and everything. And hopefully he sees that. I mean, that other kid looked good throwing the ball. And I just wondered, did he make a mistake of picking Moulton over McCaffrey? How
Right.
good would McCaffrey possibly? Would this year been different?
And Jim, I don't know what you think, but I mean, offensively, and I think everybody can probably answer this question, but to me, they just don't look very creative. You could tell that when it's going to be a run right, run left, zone, play action pass, they just look predictable.
Well, you just look at other schools and you think Michigan recruiting nationally, you think there would be a different level of athleticism out there. I agree with you. On that. And then I think coaching wise, and we've talked about this before, let's say Harbaugh decides to move on or Michigan decides to part ways. I think some of the hottest names in that area of the country all have ties to Ohio State. So who's going to be one that would be willing to cross that line, whether it be Matt Campbell from Ohio, whether it be Fickle from Cincinnati, all those guys have ties, whether it be the guy at Boston College who has Ohio State ties. All those guys have a recruiting background, but I just feel, and Nick, you know this better than me, it just seems the line's drawn so thick there. I don't know if any of them are willing to take that move, moving forward.
Pat, if you were the AD at Michigan, and we're going to get into this because I want to see what some of you guys think, and then we'll move on because I don't think Michigan's worth spending too much time on. If you're the AD at Michigan, Pat, do you move on from Jim Harbaugh?
No, I mean he's I think he has the benefit of a weird season. I mean last week, even though they didn't win a huge game, but they didn't quit on him. I mean, we just talked about Syracuse and how bad they looked and how they looked like they quit. They didn't quit on him. He's a legend. I don't think he goes anywhere unless he wants to. I think there'd be a fine line there.
Nick from C-Bus, I'm bringing you into the picture. You got a fan crew, man. Everybody putting comments says
I know, right?
Awesome. We might as well just jump off and let you talk here. You got a fan crew. I want to know what's Ohio thinking with the Luke Fickell piece, because that's the name that consistently I keep hearing is that this job, if it's offered to him, Luke Fickell's the guy. Will he think about it?
Oh, I think he'll definitely consider it. I think as we talked about last time, I think Fickell's the hot name. I think it would be awfully tough pill for him to swallow, and for Ohio State fans, it would be tough for them to see him don those colors, and really bring some of the prowess that you see that Ohio State brings, and take some of that over to the dark side, as we'd probably refer to it. The name Rock that I don't hear get a ton of play that I'm interested in your thoughts is what about Josh Heupel at UCF? Offensive coach, recruits well there, innovative, definitely would bring some excitement, I think, to the program from an offensive side of things. Has cut his teeth, already at a decent sized school. UCF is growing. Down there in the state of Florida, he's a name that I think, if you're Michigan, you have to talk to. I'm going to disagree with Pat from the standpoint of the minute you start saying, oh, they're playing hard and we beat Rutgers in triple overtime, and so maybe it's worth our time to let them make another run is foolish. And if that's the case, then let's just call Michigan, a middle of the road school, and let's not spend any time talking about them in the national picture, because if that's the standard, then by all means take it and run with it. But in my opinion, and from what I grew up on and what you grew up watching, Rock, that was never Michigan. And they are continuing to accept mediocrity. The McNamara thing to me is just another stain on him, right? The fact that you brought this kid in 2 weeks ago, in garbage time, and he played decent, and then you gave Milton the start again, and you yanked him, and then he played well again. He played well again, threw for over 200 yards, looked solid. At what point does the AD and the alumni start looking and going, what is our head coach doing? Because it looks to me like the obvious better fit for our team is sitting on the bench. He's a second string, and he gave Milton the run out of camp, right? I just think it continues. Everything you see with Michigan stacks back against Harbaugh. It all points back to him. You bring up Brown all the time. Ohio State's hung 60 on him the last 2 years, and he's kept his job. That all points back to Harbaugh. It really does. It's a cut and dry, simple scenario.
I'll say this, and I'll end it with this, is when I watched that game last weekend, as much as I want to say this, with Rutgers losing the game, Rutgers looks like they're in a much better place right now, long term, than what Michigan does. I thought, Rutgers offensively, I mean, you looked at all the numbers that they had on the screen that they showed. You looked at all the enthusiasm. You looked at the motivation. You looked at the guys on the sidelines the entire game. They're jumping around. And I'm not saying that just jumping around and playing motivated is a huge thing, but I just think that Rutgers is in a much better spot right now than what Michigan is. But, however, I'll say this, and I have the Michigan beat writer on Saturday on the Sports Watch show. I've heard a lot of people from Michigan, beat writers, saying that if Harbaugh wants to stay, he's not going anywhere, which I thought is interesting, because I agree. I think they're going to find a way at the end of the season to mutually part ways. I think he'll explore the NFL. If there's teams that want him, I think he'll make the move. But you would think all of us coaches are competitive. You would have to think that if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm saying to myself, I came here to Michigan for a lot of reasons. To get him back playing for a national championship, to beat the Ohio States. I haven't done any of that in my tenure. There's still got to be some fight in the guy to say, you know what, if you're going to get rid of me, then you might as well throw me out of here, because I'm not going without a fight. So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see how it shapes up. But I got to go to Jake with this, because I got to go to Clemson here for just a minute with the ACC. We'll get into the BCS. We saw the rankings come out last night, and we'll get to the BCS stuff here in just a little bit. But a lot of people, they put Clemson ahead of Ohio State, and a lot of them are put, from what I heard yesterday and watching it, the Big Ten only playing 4 games compared to some of these other teams. And we talked about it on this show. What are people going to do down the stretch if you play 9 or 10 games to the Big Ten 6? Well, let's look at Clemson. Trevor Lawrence back. You would think they're on pace right now to play Notre Dame for the ACC title. Many are saying if Clemson beats Notre Dame would be out. You think they'd be out of the BCS with a loss to Clemson, even if it's that one loss?
Well, I think it has to see what the rest of everyone else does. Now, if it's a blowout and Clemson blows them out, then yeah, I would say they would have to be out, because that first win, not having Trevor and some of the big defensive guys in there, missing those games or missing that game, you can tell the difference. I think it's really going to come down to of how many games Ohio State plays, what's going to happen out in the Pac-12. Is there going to be an undefeated team out there? Because they're only going to come out with 7 or even less than that. But for Clemson, and going back to what you said earlier, and I know Dabo's even come out and said he wants Trevor to win the Heisman. So I can see them playing Pittsburgh and coming out and just airing it out and trying to score as many touchdowns as they can to show everyone, hey, he's back and this is where we are. And it could be a good thing, and it also could be a bad thing, instead of just going back to what they've done well, running the ball and throwing the ball.
Jim, I'm going to bring you in too, because I want to see what were your thoughts from the first time the Notre Dame and Clemson played. I think everybody would agree that we were all surprised to see that Notre Dame, from a speed factor, was able to run with Clemson. And even though Clemson was missing a lot of key defensive players, were you more impressed with Notre Dame being able to handle and keep up with the speed?
I was impressed. The thing I was most impressed with Notre Dame was actually their ability to stop Clemson's run game. I thought their defensive line was outstanding. I think that'll be a huge test. I think North Carolina right now and their ability to run with athletes and score points. I think this is a very interesting game coming up here for Notre Dame. But I'll say this, as far as the BCS goes, I don't think Clemson at 3 or 4 with Ohio State. I think both those teams control their own destiny, both Ohio State and Clemson. I think Notre Dame, with Clemson going 3, actually helps Notre Dame more than anybody. Because if Clemson were to beat Notre Dame in a close game, that's quite an argument to say, hey, 2 and 3 played, they split 1-1, and we really don't have a true Power 5 next team. Why wouldn't they be in the 4 hole?
Yep.
So I think out of anybody, that number really hits home for Notre Dame.
Pat, were you impressed with Notre Dame?
I was, but I think Clemson was they were primed to lose that game. They had, like you said, Trevor Lawrence was out, half their defensive line was out. I mean, they were losing a lot of stuff. I just, I don't see in the rematch, Lawrence is going to come with something to prove. I don't see them losing.
Nick,
but I think, when we get to the BCS though, I mean, there's, how it's going to play out. It'll be interesting because there's only one other team, I think, in the top 5 that'll sneak in.
And Nick from CBus, when you look at Notre Dame and you look at Clemson and you look at the path right now that they have left in the regular season, Notre Dame's got to go to North Carolina this week, which that's not going to be a walk in the park to go. North Carolina's going to score points. And then obviously they end with Syracuse and that Wake Forest that I think Wake hopefully will play them pretty well. But Notre Dame definitely has the tougher path at the regular season. Clemson's got to go Pittsburgh and then at Virginia Tech.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Notre Dame has a couple more hurdles in front of them. The thing I think is interesting with the Clemson Notre Dame game is it's not like the backup quarterback for Clemson didn't throw the ball over the yard on Notre Dame. I think he threw for maybe 400 yards in that game. So while I agree Lawrence is the better quarterback, I think that's a fair, that's an obvious statement. But is he going to go out there and throw for 500? I mean, Notre Dame proved to me that they can match defensively to Clemson's offense. They can match up well enough to keep themselves in the game. I think Notre Dame's big thing is going to be, can Ian Book continue to handle the pressure? Can he protect the football? He does some things with his legs. His arm's probably a little bit underrated. I think when you watch him consistently, he's an above average quarterback that probably doesn't get the run that he deserves. Been there for a while. But yeah, I would actually agree with Jim. I think Clemson being 3 helps Notre Dame tremendously as we continue to push this. But the thing, I'm going to jump to the college football playoff for a second anyways. The logic that they used for Clemson and Ohio State, the differential was, Ohio State's pass defense is a concern. We saw them struggle against Indiana, and I think the playoff commissioner said, Clemson's handled everybody else they played. If you watch that BC game, they didn't handle BC that well, and Syracuse hung with them. As much as we want to talk and rag on Syracuse didn't blow Syracuse doors off in the first half, right? So it seems to me the criteria again is inconsistent when it comes to the playoff committee, and it definitely seems to me like they're weighing games that have been played for some teams and then not the other when we look like a BYU.
You just made Coach Medicis smile there when you said Syracuse played with them for a little bit.
They did, a little bit.
Coach Medicis, how about jumping over to the SEC? Obviously, right now, Florida's on target and on pace to play Alabama in the SEC title game. And I've been really impressed with Kyle Trask. I think he's played himself into the Heisman, possibly winning the Heisman Trophy. But when you look at the SEC, you got obviously Alabama, the Iron Bowl this week. They're going to be without Nick Saban this week. He tested positive for COVID, not a false test this time. But is Florida legit? Do they have a legit shot to beat Alabama, you think, if they collide in the SEC title game?
Well, I mean, you saw what Lane Kiffin's offense did to Alabama's defense. So I think there's definitely a shot. But, I mean, I think if you're Notre Dame or Clemson right now, you got to be hoping that Alabama beats Florida in the SEC championship. Because like we said on Saturday's show, if Alabama loses to Florida in the SEC championship, Alabama's not dropping from number 1 down to number 5. So you got to imagine they're in. Ohio State's going to play nobody the rest of the year, so you can put them in. You could put the winner of the Clemson-Notre Dame game in. And if Florida beats Alabama in the SEC championship, how do you not put them into the semifinals? They have to be in with a win over Alabama. So at that point, that Notre Dame Clemson game turns into if you win, you're in. If you lose, you're out. So if I'm a Notre Dame fan right now, I am buying my Alabama stock right now.
Pat, how impressed you've been with Alabama able to reload at quarterback with Mac Jones, and how impressive they've been?
I mean, Alabama's the best team in football. I mean, they're, I'm sure people argue about Ohio State's and Clemson's, but, year after year, Alabama is the team to beat. Since the giving up, I mean, I almost called it a loss, but the giving up 40 some odd points to Mississippi. I mean, Alabama's only given up 11 points a game. They've given up 44 total points in that time, scoring 48 points a game. I mean, they're, I see Florida playing them, but I don't see again how Florida can play with them for 4 quarters.
Jim, what's impressed you the most about Kyle Trask and the way he runs that offense?
Well, he's got some long targets to throw to, but I'll tell you what, his ability to catch and throw, he really has a good command of that offense. For the amount of attempts that he's thrown, his ability to take care of the football and not turn it over is huge. And he's tough. I mean, he takes some hits and he keeps getting back up. So he's a tough kid. He's a hard-nosed player. He values the football. I think Florida's defense is not of a caliber of some of these other teams. So I think he knows he has to put up a certain amount of points. But he's certainly a very, very improved football player this year.
And Jake, when we're talking about Trask, with 31 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions, but I thought the key stat when I was going back here, he's only been sacked 6 times. And we talk all the time, if you can give any good quarterback, let alone these high-profile teams like the Kyle Trask and the Fields and so forth, they can really beat you. He's only been sacked 6 times.
Yeah, he's done a great job of knowing, what the defense has given him, and he's picking his spots. It definitely helps that you have some, like Coach Kramer said, that some big talented receivers out there, and the tight end there is pretty legit. So if he sees pressure on him, he knows he might have man coverage, and he's going to take his shot with the one-on-one and put the ball where it needs to be. And you kind of see that across the board with the Alabama guy too, and with Trevor, and at times Joe Fields. That those good quarterbacks, the elite, see what the defense is giving them and picks them apart that way. Where some young guys that are back there and their eyes are wide and they get flustered a lot, that they're not sure what to do, hold on to the ball half a second. But the ones that understand the playbook and under what their coach's system and knows, hey, if I see this, I'm going here. If I see this, I'm going to the other guy. And then also he has trust in some of those receivers. Some of those balls are in the perfect spot for those guys. They had pretty good coverage on the receiver, especially the tight end down in the red zone, and he puts it where only his guy can catch it.
And Nick from C-Bus, you started talking a little bit about the BCS, and the rankings came out just last night. Was there anything that really stood out to you for the initial week one here of the rankings that stood out?
I mean, obviously, I thought the Clemson Ohio State debate is interesting to me. I think when I look at the numbers a little bit, Ohio State's schedule strength 26, Clemson's 64th. Ohio State's played 3 teams, or Clemson's 1-1 versus the top 30. I think Ohio State's 1-0. Versus the top 10. Ohio State's 1-0. Clemson's 0-1. Ohio State beat Indiana by 7. Clemson beat BC by 6 with a loss. I thought the way that they kind of decided there was interesting. I thought the BYU piece is a fascinating argument. From BYU standpoint, I understand they haven't played anybody, but I thought 14th for a 9-0 team was a little bit of a slap in the face, for where they're at currently. From that standpoint, I think A&M, Florida, Cincinnati, all kind of spot there. I thought the other one we touched on it was Georgia. I understand Georgia's 5-2, but their 2 losses are terrible. I mean, double-digit losses makes no sense whatsoever, other than the typical SEC bias that I think that the committee typically is going to lean towards to go down that path. And the one thing I touch on Florida, I agree everything with Trask. I think, he is definitely morphed into a Heisman contender. He's right there. I'm going to jump on what Pat said. Nobody's beaten Bama, I don't think, probably in the country, but let alone the SEC. But I think Florida's weakness is not offense. Florida's weakness is defense. They have some players on defense, but they're definitely inconsistent. They even showed it against Vandy last week, right? I mean, they let a bad Vandy team really hang around for 2.5, 3 quarters, all because their defense was really getting dominated up front on the line of scrimmage. And that concerns me. When you play at Bama, they're going to score points. And if your defense is struggling, with some of those lower tier teams in the SEC, look out for Bama to hang 50 on you pretty easy.
And Pat, anybody outside of the top 4 or 5 teams, is there anybody you think that can make a run late in the year to sneak in there?
No, I have, none of it surprised me how the rankings came out. I think how it plays out is Alabama ends up number 1. I think Ohio State ends up 2, and really the only game that is in question is the Clemson Notre Dame, rematch. And if Clemson wins, I think they're 3rd, and I still think Notre Dame stays at 4. But if Notre Dame beats them, then I have A&M being the 4th team in, and I think Clemson slides out with 2 losses to Notre Dame.
Jake, how about yourself? What were your early impressions?
Well, going back to what Nick said, that Clemson did beat Miami, who's in the top 10 right now. He said we were 0-1. They blew out Miami during prime time. And going with the Clemson-Ohio State argument, it's, Clemson's played 8 games. All those teams have played almost 8 games, and you're putting Ohio State in with only 4 wins. So I can see why they kind of did that. Who have they really played? In Indiana, like Medicis said, 5 inches from losing that game, and it could be totally different, So I don't mind them putting Clemson ahead. Now, the only scary part is they always bring up whoever with the first rankings that come out, whoever's 3rd, and that has not made it to the made it to the playoff round. So hopefully this year, knock on wood, this will be the first year they actually, break that curse for that spot. But for the rest of the thing, BYU, I can see they haven't really played anyone. Yeah, they play in those odd times, so everyone gets to see them and they light it up and put a lot of points up. I was more interested in Northwestern being that high up, just being a Wisconsin team and showing that, I still think it's a little early for them. But like they said, if Clemson wins out, obviously they're in. If it's closed, I think Notre Dame will get that 4th slot. If it's a blowout, then I could see Texas A&M sitting there. But their only claim to success is beating Florida. They haven't really played much either. So that's where I think a Cincinnati can maybe slide in right there if they keep blowing people out, even though they had a close one this past weekend.
Coach Kramer, what'd you think? What were your thoughts when that rankings come out?
I think the 4 will certainly work themselves out. The only team I think there's 2 teams on the outside right now that have a chance, and they both need help, and that's Florida and Cincinnati, in my opinion. I think I do think that if Notre Dame is able to run the table up to that game with Clemson and Clemson wins, I still think they may stay in. I agree with Nick in terms of Florida beating Alabama. If that happens, how do you keep Florida out? And then a lot of things have to go right for Cincinnati. Obviously, a Power 5, not, still undefeated though, with a couple things that go on, maybe they sneak in. But I think those are the only 2 teams, in my opinion, that are still in the mix.
Coach Medicis, anything different?
No, I think everyone. I agree exactly with what Jim said. I think Cincinnati, they had a chance against UCF last week to put a statement out. We're not a Power 5 team, but we're a team that deserves to be in the top 4. And until that 4th quarter, I mean, that was a toss-up game. And this is a down year for UCF. So if you can't put away, I'm not going to say they're a bad team, but they're a good team. But if you want to compete for a national title, you have to blow that team out. And I just think that right there hurt them. And then talking about, BYU, I mean, BYU caught, BYU lost their whole non-conference schedule. They were supposed to play the Big Ten and the Pac-12 all year. They have to lose that, and they pick up games with the Sun Belt. And unfortunately, you can't control when you're scrambling for games, and the only people that will play you are the Sun Belt. I mean, it is what it is at this point. You can beat them by 60, and you're not going to be a top 10 team because you look and you have, the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC. These guys are going at it every week, and you look, and BYU is beating Louisiana Monroe 66-10 at 11 o'clock at night in the East, and nobody pays attention to it. So I will say Zach Wilson's special. The quarterback of BYU is really good, and nobody knows about him. But yeah, BYU is not a contender this year. It's unfortunate because I think had they played the schedule that they were supposed to, who knows what would have happened. But given what they have right here, there's no way they crack even the top, 10 or 9. I don't see them getting any higher.
Well, I don't disagree with any. All you guys make good points. I think for me, when I released mine, I had obviously, Bama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, then Clemson. But what really surprised me was, and I know the Clemson blew out Miami. Miami's only got 1 loss. I think the Georgia surprises me a little bit. I agree with the Northwestern piece, but I think all these teams really control their own destiny. Northwestern, if they can finish this thing out, play Ohio State, the winner of that game is in. I kind of disagree with one thing is I think Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, unless a fluke happens, you're not going to drop Alabama out of the top 4, which somebody said, if they lose the SEC title game to Florida. If Notre Dame and Clemson play a good game, I know Trevor Lawrence didn't play that game, but I still think that's going to be a close game. I don't think Clemson's going to blow them out. Now, they could. So if Notre Dame loses and they're a 1-loss team and their 1 loss is to Clemson, who they beat the first time, I think it's hard to drop any of these top 4 teams out. Now, I think the team, unfortunately, that would have the argument is if Florida beats Alabama and wins the SEC title game, how do you keep the SEC title champion out of the playoffs? So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's unfortunate for the Cincinnatis and the BYUs because they're both having fantastic seasons. I would love to see Luke Fickell's defense against any of these teams to see what they could do. I'd love to see the BYU kid Zach Smith play against some of these top defenses. I still think Indiana should have stayed in the top 10 because I still think they belong there. Georgia with 2 losses. No way you're telling me that you put a 2-loss Georgia team in the top 10. I'm not buying it. But some good stories. But, guys, for the sake of time, I want to get through some of the picks. I want to get the fact and fiction, give you guys the parting shot. So I want to go right to the picks for this week. I sent you guys the game, so we'll kind of go around the horn here. Let's start Iowa State at Texas. Now, all of a sudden, no pressure on Tom Herman. I'm not hearing that Tom Herman's going to get fired because he keeps winning some games. Iowa State at Texas. Coach Medicis, who you got?
I still think his job is on the line. So I think this is, again, a must-win game for Texas at home. And I think they're going to get it done. I think Texas wins the game.
Nick from C-Bus, who you got?
I'm going to take the Fighting Matt Campbells. I think Texas has done good against the run all year, but I think their porous pass defense catches up with them. I think Iowa State clips them in a close one.
Coach P, who you got?
That's a tough one. I think Texas. They're even going to cover. I mean, it's only -2, so.
The Piznat, they're going to cover. The line's only 2. That game's at Texas, too.
Yeah. I
Coach
got some
Kramer
numbers for you later.
Coach Kramer, who you got?
I do think that Tom Herman's job is on the line in this game. This would keep him. Sam Ehlinger would not win the Big 12 in his 4 years with him, and I think that Matt Campbell gets it done in the big game this time. Iowa State.
I like it. Coach Dercola, who about you?
I'm going to go with Texas. Being at home and the travel, and Iowa State just coming off a big win over Kansas State, which you say was one of the best teams in the Big 12. So I think they're coming off that high, according to you, but I think Texas will have them at home.
Tom Herman finds a way this week at home. I think Tom Herman wins a big game, and I love Matt Campbell, though. I love Matt Campbell. I think he's been able to do more with less at Iowa State than what some of these other teams have been. But I think Tom Herman finds a way this week. All right, the other one we got. Let's go Notre Dame at North Carolina. Jake, who you got?
Well, just looking at the other, sounds like Notre Dame has some linemen out, so that's going to be interesting for them with that continuity there. I think it's going to be close, and I think Notre Dame's actually going to pull it out still, but it'll be a close game.
Coach Kramer, who you got?
There's a lot of me that says North Carolina might pull this game off. I just feel like this is almost a little bit of a trap game, and I think North Carolina plays to the level of their competition a lot. But I am going to go with Notre Dame.
Okay. All right. Coach P.
Yeah, I think North Carolina keeps it close for a while, but, I think Notre Dame runs away with it, wins by at least a couple touchdowns.
Nikki from C-Bus, who you got?
Yeah, I'm going to take Notre Dame. I think North Carolina just hasn't seen a defense on par with Notre Dame all year. They'll hit some big plays. North Carolina will keep them in the game, but Notre Dame's too much.
Coach Medicis, you going against our guy Pags as Notre Dame?
No, I actually think Notre Dame blows them out in this game. I think they need a statement.
Really?
And I think they're trying to prove that they're for real right now, and they want to make a statement. I think they come out and they beat up on North Carolina.
Wow. I'm going Notre Dame. I went back and forth on this. Notre Dame reminds me of the old-fashioned Big Ten. They're physical up front. Speed-wise, I think they're going to be just fine to handle North Carolina. And Nick Sianis from C-Bus, you mentioned Ian Book. I think Ian Book's has had a great season this year managing that offense. I think they go down there, and I think they win by a couple touchdowns. But I think North Carolina will score this week. So I think it'll be a high-scoring game, but I'm going to go with Notre Dame this week. Auburn, Alabama, without Coach Saban, the Iron Bowl, one of the big rivalry games. Coach P, who you got?
Bama in a blowout.
Think so? What's the line?
23.5.
Wow, 23.5.
I mean, don't be surprised he doesn't hang 60 on him.
Wow. Coach Medicis, who you got?
I think I could coach Alabama to a victory this weekend. I don't think it matters. I think you can throw anybody in. I think Bama rolls today or this weekend.
Nick from C-Bus, who you got?
Oh, Bama all day. I don't think it's close. I don't know if they cover 23.5, big number in a rivalry game, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Jake.
Alabama. Enough said.
Coach Kramer, you any different? we lose Jim?
I think we know he said Bama.
Coach Kramer, can you hear us? All right, I'm going to go Alabama, but I'm going to say this. Gus Malzahn somehow finds a way in these games to play Alabama close. I know Nick Saban's not going to be there. I think Steve Sarkisian's going to be in control. I think he's going to get head coaching responsibilities. I think Alabama's going to beat him, but for some reason, these rivalry games, Auburn, Alabama, the last 2 to 3 years have been really good games. I would take Auburn with getting the points. I don't think they beat them by 30 or anything like that. Coach P says it's 23-24. I think it's going to be a better game than what people think, but I'll take Alabama. Coach Kramer, we get you back? No, I'll keep him on the screen. Okay. NC State at Syracuse. Nick from C-Bus. Cuse got any chance?
I think this one's going to be a little closer than the spread. I think the spread's 14.5. But I think NC State's too much in the end. I think you got to win up front to win any of these games. NC State's not great by any stretch, but I just don't think Syracuse has anything up front to be able to hang. I think they lose a close one, maybe by 7-8 points.
Jake, how about you?
NC State, coming off that big win against Medicis Liberty team, I think they'll handle Syracuse pretty well.
Coach Medicis, who you got?
NC State, I don't think we should even talk anything about Syracuse. They stink.
Boy, and you're the big Syracuse guy.
Listen,
this is unheard of. I've converted you.
I've lost so many times.
He's on the basketball for Syracuse now.
He is.
I'm done with it. There's been no progress. Let's move on. It's like talking about the Jets. All right,
Coach P, any chance Syracuse can find a way to beat NC State?
I think there's a chance, but I think they covered a spread of 14, but I don't see them winning the game.
Well, I'm going NC State. You know that. I think it's just, we talked about Syracuse early on. They're just an uninspired, no motivation. They just want to get this season over with. So I'm going to go NC State. Coach Kramer said his computer died. He did give me his upset pick, so we'll see if he comes back on. Last but not least, rivalry game, the Civil War. It's another good rivalry game. My wife's from Oregon, so this game means something to my family. Oregon at Oregon State. Jake, who you got?
Oregon. I think that they've been playing well, especially under the new offensive coordinator. Their offense looks a little different, but it's been working very well for them. They just have to watch the turnovers. Watching them, they have a lot of turnovers, but I think that they will handle the Civil War pretty well up there.
Coach P, who you got?
Oh, boy. I wouldn't even bet the game if you weren't forcing me to. So I guess gun to my head, Oregon.
Oregon. Coach Medicis, who you got?
You didn't jump at the chance to talk about Fordham football when he threw that little softball underhand pitch to you about the Oregon new offensive coordinator?
Joe Moorhead, one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. He was at a bad fit at Mississippi State. He'll be a head coach again. Who you got?
With that being said, Oregon rolls. Oregon wants to spoil the party. So they got to win. They got to win big. So I'm picking Oregon.
Nick from C-Bus, who you got?
Yeah, Oregon, too much offense. They scared me a little bit with UCLA last week to let them come back into the game, but Oregon State doesn't have enough. They're not a very good football team. I think it might be a little closer than people think for a while, but nothing to get worried about.
I'm going Oregon. I don't think it's close. I think offense. But I think the interesting storyline here is the Pac-12 right now. I mean, you got USC, and again, they've only played, 3 games? A 3-0 USC team, potentially a 3-0 Oregon team. Not getting any love right now because we haven't seen much of it. So we'll see if either one of them can spoil the party. All right, guys, I want to do this real fast. I want to do quick fact or fiction. I got some fun questions, and all you guys are going to do is say fact or fiction to the statement. And let me see. And of course, my thing didn't save from last night, so I had some fun questions in here, but it looks like only a couple of them saved. But we've already talked about a couple of them. We've already picked a couple of the rivalry games, but fact or fiction, the Michigan-Ohio State game's the best rivalry in college football. Nick from C-Bus, I know what you're going to say. but I'll let you
Fact.
start it.
Fact, no doubt.
Coach Medicis.
Fiction. Michigan can't beat them. Until they beat them, no, fiction.
All right. Okay. Coach P.
Fiction.
Jesus Christ. No, you guys how can you, whether they get blown out or not, what other rivalry game in college football? I know there's a lot of good ones. Army, Navy, Auburn,
Army,
Alabama.
Navy.
But Ohio State, Michigan is the game. Okay. Jake, what are you going? Fact or fiction?
Maybe in your house.
Fiction.
Fiction too. I'm going fact. Coach,
About time you got something right, Rock.
I know, right? Did I forget anybody? No, I think we got everybody, right? All right, so let me go to my other one here. All right. Nick from C-Bus, you gave me this one last night. Coach P, Christmas dinner, is it better than Thanksgiving dinner?
Oof. In my house, well, my mother and father's house, yes, it is.
All right, so you're going fact. Jake, what are you going?
Fiction.
Fiction, okay. Nick from C-Bus.
Fact. Give me ham and scalloped potatoes all day.
All right. Coach Medicis.
Fiction. Are you guys nuts? Thanksgiving? Come on.
Christmas
Fiction.
dinner is at my house. It's the 7 fish, so I get the seafood. So I'm going fact with that one. Dark meat better than the white meat. Coach P.
Fiction.
Oh, Nick from C-Bus.
Fact. For sure.
Coach Medicis.
Fiction.
Ooh, Jake, what do you got? There
Fact.
you go. Fact. I'm going fact too. I love the dark over the white. How about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade? Better than the New Year's Day Parade. Nick from C-Bus.
Fiction.
All right. Jake.
Ooh. Fact.
Coach Medicis.
Fiction.
Ooh, Coach P.
Neither, because I don't watch either one. I never have.
I'm going fact.
Can't even
Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade. You can't beat it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me see if I had another one. I had a couple other sports ones, but that, for the sake of time, we're a little bit over. All right, guys, you know how this works. I'm going to put you solo on the screen. You can go with your pardon shots, and then make sure all you guys, I appreciate you. We'll do this thing again probably in a couple weeks. I left a couple open dates. Hopefully, we're talking more about bowl season and all that. But make sure you guys have a good Thanksgiving. I appreciate each one of you guys coming on tonight. It's always fun. I know we could do it for a couple hours, but I thank each and every one of you guys for coming on tonight. So I appreciate it. All right. So let's see. Who do we want to go to first? Let's see. Let me take you guys off the screen. Let me see. There's Jake. All right. Let's see. Coach P, what do you got? Can you hear us, Pat? Pat, can you hear us? Pat. I don't know if Pat can hear us. All right, hold on. Coach P, can you hear us?
Hey, Coach P, what do you got?
Pat, what do you got?
He's saying, what do you got for parting words?
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you. What do you got?
You told me I couldn't talk about the Giants because this is a college show. So
That's right. I can hear you. Go ahead. You got the floor. It's yours.
I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
Go ahead. We got
first,
you.
You didn't give us the upset pick. So I'm going to pick Penn State over Michigan as my upset of the week.
All right.
What I love about college football, if you haven't seen it, watch the video of Tom Allen talking to his team after Indiana lost to Ohio State. There's not enough of that enthusiasm. And that's, hooray to him. Good job. Keep it up. And I hope eventually he beats Ohio State.
No, very well said. I can't beat that. Tom Allen did a hell of a job, and that was great. All right, let's see. Let's go to
Well, it was great being on the show tonight. Had a lot of fun with it. My parting words, I wish the college playoff system would expand just for this year. This is a perfect opportunity for them to try something new. If it doesn't work, they can always go back. You saw how baseball did it, and they were successful. NFL is add another team, and they'll probably be successful with that. So I can't see why. I mean, I'm not saying jump it to 16, but even if it's the 6 teams and have 2 playing games, or 5 and have a playing game to that, but ultimately being 8 teams would be the ultimate thing, be something nice to watch, especially if we're still cooped up and inside. So I really wish they would reconsider that, and I think they would. You get high ratings on television and everything, and it'd be exciting to watch. And with that, thanks for having me on.
All right, Rock. I'm hoping you can hear me because I'm on the TV. So I'm gonna go with my parting shot to Dabo Swinney. I'm sick of this dude. Sounds like a whiny teenager. He goes after Florida State not once, not twice, but 3 times this past weekend, accusing them of ducking Clemson when they turn around and they're trying to schedule them on December 12th. It's absolutely ludicrous. This is the same guy that said that he would quit coaching college football if the college athletes started to get paid. Sorry, Dabo, but you're the highest paid state employee in the state of South Carolina, making $90 million on your contract off of the backs of those players that are playing for scholarships. He's tone deaf. I'm sick of this. He's not this all shucks coach that he likes you to believe. He's buying his own hype. He makes it so easy not to root for Clemson. So my parting shot is Dabo Swinney, shut your mouth. And thanks for the time, Rock.
Man, I got to follow that. What am I going to do? A couple weeks ago, I talked about Coastal Carolina and the great story that they're having, being, I think, their 3rd year now in FBS, and the fact that they're competing. They're up to number 16 in the polls, number 20 in the playoff polls, and the schedule looks pretty good going forward. They got Texas State next week, and then it goes into that big Liberty game. They can get by Liberty. They got Troy in a conference championship rematch with Lafayette, who they beat earlier on in the year. I'd love to see Coastal Carolina go undefeated, make a little run, make a little noise, see if they can sneak into the BCS, if they can continue to win out.
Nick, and we'll another fun night tonight. We'll have to do this thing again in a couple weeks or so to hopefully talk about some bowl games, but we'll have a good time on Saturday morning as well.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, all right, man, I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So my parting shot, first of all, I want to say thanks to all the guys tonight. Everybody was great. It's nice to come on the show and break things up a little bit, have a little fun. This show got a lot of views, close to 2,000. I'll bring the guys back in a couple weeks again. We'll run this thing back. It was fun. I was glad we got Coach P in here. But my parting shot, Coach P mentioned Tom Allen, and I want to throw this out there about Tom Allen. Tom Allen spent 14 years as a high school football coach before even becoming a college coach. He didn't even become a college coach until 2007, where he started off at the Division III level as just a position coach. So you're talking about a guy right now at a Power 5 school, a small Power 5 school that's really known as a basketball school with Indiana and the likes of Bob Knight in the history of Indiana basketball, the great national championship undefeated season. But this is a guy that went from nothing, went from high school to the Division III, Division II, Division I. He didn't even get a coordinating job until 2015. He was the defensive coordinator at South Florida. And then in 2016, the defensive coordinator for Indiana. And what really, really was a touching moment for me, being, my dad was a high school football coach and a coach in general, and Coach Dercola's dad's a coach, Coach Kramer as well, and we can relate Coach P as well. But the moment when Tom Allen's son got hurt on the field, and Tom Allen went out on the field, not as a coach, but as a dad, as a parent. And to see the moment that he had with his son on the field was a touching moment that I think for me in college football this season, if there's one good moment that we need in our life this year in college football, it's Tom Allen. And listen, there's a lot of good coaches in college football, and a lot of coaches do a lot of good things. But for me, that moment was bigger than college football. That moment was special. The halftime speeches, the end of the game speeches that he's made, hearing his players say, "I love you," that's what college football is. That's what people need in the world today, moments like that. So my feel-good story is Tom Allen. Love you, Coach. Keep doing what you do. Keep doing your thing. Next Wednesday night on the Rock Pile, I'm going to go back to talking to small business owners, Rebecca Clester. She is the owner of Whisty Jack's Salon, Whisty Jack's Glass Slipper, and Bella's Event Planning and Wedding. She will join me next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So one more special shout out tonight, too, to John Griggs and Northwestern Mutual. John was fantastic tonight to help sponsor the show. John Griggs, his goal of his practice is to educate and empower people to reach for their full potential. The Rock Pile, again, folks, is where dreams become reality. Happy Thanksgiving from my team here. Happy Thanksgiving from the Mohawk Valley Sports Watch this Saturday. We will be on the air from 9 to 11 on WKAL. So thanks for tuning in tonight, everybody.